I was standing there, frozen in the kitchen doorway, holding the pudding tray I had made with so much care, when I heard the words that shattered my heart like glass. Selfish old woman, doesn't even seem like we came to spend Christmas with her. Only thinks about stuffing her face. The voice of my own daughter Lucy echoed through the living room like a slap to the soul. My fingers trembled so much I almost let the tray slip from my wrinkled hands. There I was, Margaret Santos, at 78 years old, discovering that to my family I was nothing more than a burden, a nuisance that insisted on living. The pudding wobbled on the tray, and for an absurd moment I thought it too knew it wasn't wanted. I took a deep breath, trying to control the tremor that rose from my chest to my throat. In the living room, I heard the low laughter of Lisa, my 22-year-old granddaughter, agreeing with her mother while checking her phone. "She does eat too much, Grandma. Have you seen how much food there is here? For someone living on Social Security." Mark, my son-in-law, let out a dry laugh. "She must be crazy. Spent a fortune on this useless feast." Useless. The word ricocheted off the walls of my chest. 47 years I had dedicated to education, teaching children to read, to count, to dream. 30 years raising Lucy alone after her father abandoned us. 22 years being a present grandmother, caring for Lisa when Lucy needed to work. And now, that feast I had prepared with my own aching hands, seasoned with all the love that still remained in my tired heart, was just useless waste. I leaned against the kitchen wall, feeling the weight of the years not in my curved back but in my soul. The steam from the still hot pans fogged my glasses, or maybe it was the tears I refused to let fall. Not in my kitchen. Not in my sacred territory, where for decades I had created memories, celebrated small and big victories, comforted broken hearts with hot soup or chocolate cake. I looked back and saw my entire life stamped on those peeling walls. It was 1965 when I arrived at this house, a young 20-year-old teacher, recently graduated and full of dreams. I remember perfectly the day I held the key for the first time, trembling with emotion and fear. The house was small, simple, but it was mine, our safe corner in the world. Mine and Anthony's. Anthony, my first and only love. I met him at the school where I began teaching. He was the principal, a gentle man with kind eyes who saw in me not just a teacher, but a woman capable of transforming the world one child at a time. We married in 1967, in a simple ceremony at the neighborhood church. I wore my mother's dress, altered so carefully it looked new. He was radiant, whispering promises of eternal love while we danced in the living room of this same house, decorated with flowers from our small backyard. They were 3 years of pure happiness. 3 years when this kitchen bubbled with life, with Anthony helping me prepare dinners, laughing at my disastrous attempts to make bread, teaching me to season meat the way his mother did. We planned to have children, dreamed of a house full of laughter and mess. I had already mentally decorated the little room that would be the baby's, with white furniture and yellow curtains, because we wanted the surprise of discovering the gender only at birth. But life, as I discovered too early, has its own plans. In 1970, Anthony was diagnosed with cancer. In 6 months, my world collapsed. I held his hand in the hospital until his last breath, promising I would live for both of us, that I would be strong, that I would honor the memory of our love. I was only 25 years old and already a widow. I returned to this empty house, to this silent kitchen, and thought about giving up. For weeks I could barely get out of bed. It was my students who saved me. 7- and 8-year-old children who came to school every day expecting me to be there, with a smile and a story to tell. I realized that even without the children I never had with Anthony, I had dozens of children who needed me. That's when I met Robert, 2 years later. He was a salesman, a charismatic man who appeared in my life like a whirlwind of promises and easy smiles. I was vulnerable, needy, and he knew exactly what to say. "You're too beautiful to be alone, Margaret. You deserve to be loved, deserve to have a family." The words my wounded heart needed to hear. We married in 1973, and in 1974 Lucy was born. I remember holding her for the first time, that tiny and perfect being, and feeling that my life finally made sense again. Robert seemed happy too, at least in the beginning. He played with the baby, helped me with nighttime feedings, talked about the bright future we would have together. But Robert was like sand between my fingers. The more I tried to hold him, the more he slipped away. The night outings began, the threadbare excuses, the distant looks during dinner. When Lucy turned 2, he simply disappeared. He left a note in the kitchen. "I'm not cut out for this, Margaret. You two deserve someone better." And there I was again, alone. But this time with a small daughter to raise, bills to pay, and a heart that refused to trust men again. I dove into work and motherhood with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Lucy would be everything I couldn't be, secure, loved, protected from all the pain I had faced. For 28 years, it was just me and her against the world. I worked during the day at school, gave private lessons at night, sewed clothes for others on weekends. All so Lucy could have the best, new uniform every year, complete school supplies, even piano lessons I could barely afford. In this kitchen, I prepared her favorite dishes, cured her colds with homemade teas, listened to her teenage sorrows while we made cookies together. Lucy grew up beautiful and intelligent, graduated in business administration, got a good job. When she met Mark at 26, I was genuinely happy for her. He seemed like a good guy, hardworking, respectful. On their wedding day, celebrated in the backyard of this house because it was what we could afford, I cried with joy. Finally, my daughter would have what I always wanted for her: a stable family, a present partner. Lisa was born a year later. My granddaughter, my little gift from heaven. From the first day, she was the light of my eyes. When Lucy returned to work, I was the one who took care of the baby. They were wonderful years, the happiest of my life since Anthony's death. Lisa grew up practically in this house, in this kitchen. I taught her to make cookies, to peel potatoes, to season beans. She called me Grandma Maggie and said that when she grew up she was going to live with me forever. But children grow up, and Lisa was no exception. At 12, she began spending less time here. At 15, she only came when she needed money for something her parents didn't want to buy. At 18, when she entered college, our conversations were reduced to quick WhatsApp messages and protocol visits on my birthday. Lucy also drifted away. Gradually, our conversations became functional. She called when she needed me to take care of something, when she had financial problems, when she wanted to vent about Mark. I became the solution to her problems, no longer a person she genuinely wanted to have around. Retirement came in 2012, after 47 years dedicated to education. On the last day of class, my students threw me a surprise party. They were 8-year-old children who had barely known me for a year, but cried when I said I wouldn't be coming back. They saw in me what my own family seemed to have forgotten: a person worth caring about. The first years of retirement were difficult. Loneliness hit hard. This house, which had once been the stage for so much love and life, echoed empty. I tried to get involved in church activities, in senior groups, but nothing filled the void of not being needed, of not being loved for who I was, only sought after for what I could offer. That's when I began dedicating myself even more to Christmas dinners. If this was the only occasion when my family gathered with me, I would make it worthwhile. I planned for months, saved on pharmacy and grocery bills to be able to buy the most expensive ingredients, spent days preparing each dish to perfection. It wasn't about food, it was about love. It was my way of saying, you are important to me, you deserve my best. But apparently they didn't see it that way. And if you're following this story and identifying with the pain of someone who just wants to be loved and valued, leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories like this. Sometimes, the most powerful stories are those that make us reflect on how we treat the people we love most. Returning to that cursed December night, I forced myself to leave the kitchen and enter the living room. Lucy, Mark and Lisa were on the sofa, each in their own world. Lucy was flipping through a magazine, sighing dramatically at each page. Mark was watching the game on his phone, grumbling when his team missed a play. Lisa was posting photos on Instagram, capturing perfect angles of the set table, probably to show friends how she was a dedicated granddaughter. "Dinner is ready," I announced, trying to keep my voice steady. "About time," Mark muttered, without lifting his eyes from his phone. "Mom, you overdid it again," Lucy said, but her voice carried no affection, only irritation. "Look at the amount of food. How are we going to eat all this?" "I made it thinking of you," I replied quietly. "Remember how you used to love my French toast when you were little? And Mark always said my stuffing was the best he ever had." "That was before, Mom. Now I have to watch my cholesterol, diabetes. I can't eat these heavy things." Lisa finally lifted her head. "Grandma, you know I'm vegan now, right? I don't eat anything that comes from animals." My heart sank. It was true. She had mentioned this on WhatsApp a few months ago, but I thought it was a passing phase. Even so, I had prepared a special salad for her, had even researched vegan recipes on the internet, but she hadn't even noticed. "I made a special salad for you," I said, trying to sound excited. "Oh, cool," she replied without enthusiasm, already turning her attention back to her phone. We sat at the table, and the silence was embarrassing. They ate mechanically, chewing quickly, as if they were fulfilling an obligation. No one praised the food. No one asked how I had spent the year, if I was healthy, if I needed anything. The conversation revolved around their problems: Lucy's stressful work, Mark's debts, Lisa's university dramas. "Mom, this stuffing is too salty," Lucy complained, making a face. "The turkey is dry," Mark added. "Grandma, there's too much sugar in the French toast," Lisa said, pushing the plate away. Each criticism was like a stab. I had tasted all the dishes before serving. Everything was perfect. They were complaining just to complain, finding flaws where none existed, as if it were impossible to admit I had done something good. After dinner, they didn't even wait for dessert. Mark and Lisa went out to see the fireworks in the square. "We'll be back soon, Grandma," Lisa lied, giving me a protocol kiss on the cheek. I knew she was going to a party with friends and would only return at dawn. Lucy threw herself on the sofa with a glass of wine, turned on the television, and ignored my existence. I began collecting the dishes alone. My knees protested with every movement, my spine complained about the weight of the trays, but I continued. I always continued. That's what I did. Cleaned up the mess, solved problems, took care of everything so others didn't have to bother. While washing the dishes, I finally let the tears flow. There, with my hands in hot soapy water, I cried for the girl I had been, who dreamed of a united and loving family. I cried for Anthony, who truly loved me and would never have allowed me to be treated this way. I cried for all the dinners I had prepared with so much love, only to be despised and disrespected. It was at that moment that an idea began to form in my mind, an idea that made me stop crying and straighten up, as if an inner force had awakened after years asleep. The next day, Lucy, Mark and Lisa left early, barely saying goodbye. "Thanks for dinner, Mom," Lucy said, without looking in my eyes. "See you next year." As always, they took containers with the leftover food, but they didn't take the memory of special moments, because there hadn't been any. I was left alone in this house, but for the first time in years, I didn't feel empty. I had a plan that had been forming for months, actually, without me realizing it. Each humiliation, each disrespect, each moment when I was treated like old, useless furniture had built an iron determination inside me. I went to my room and opened the nightstand drawer. There was the folder I had carefully organized in recent weeks. Documents, bank statements, notary papers. For 53 years living in this house, I had religiously paid every installment, every fee, every tax. The house was mine, completely paid off. And the money I had saved during all those years of extreme economy, working extra, sewing until late hours, was also mine. I picked up the phone and called Dr. Martinez, the lawyer who had helped me with the house documentation when I paid off the mortgage. "Doctor, it's Margaret. I need to make some changes to my will." In the days that followed, I immersed myself in intensive research. I discovered the Dawn Institute, an NGO that cared for elderly people abandoned by their families. I visited the place and my heart filled with an emotion I hadn't felt in years. There were dozens of people like me, people who had given everything for their family and now found themselves alone and forgotten. I met Rose, 85 years old, who had raised 5 children alone working as a washerwoman, and now none of them visited her. I met Jim, a widower who built a company from scratch to leave to his children, who institutionalized him as soon as they got the inheritance. I met Helen, a retired teacher like me, who sold candy on the street to supplement her income because her children said her retirement was more than enough. It was these people who truly welcomed me, who listened to my story without judgment, who shared their own pain and discoveries. With them I learned I wasn't alone, that my experience was more common than I would like to believe. It was also at the Institute that I met Sophia, a volunteer psychologist who became my confidant and friend. "Margaret," she told me one day, "you can't control how people treat you, but you can control how you react to that treatment. You have power, more than you imagine." I spent the following months reconnecting with myself. I returned to reading, a pleasure I had abandoned for lack of time and energy. I began participating in the Institute's activities, helping other elderly people deal with their feelings of abandonment and rejection. I discovered that my experience as a teacher gave me a natural ability to listen and advise. I also began writing. First they were just loose notes, memories I didn't want to lose. Then they became letters. Letters to Lucy, to Lisa, to Mark. Letters I wrote at night, sitting in this same kitchen, putting on paper all the feelings I had never been able to express aloud. Lucy continued calling sporadically, always when she needed something. Once it was borrowed money to pay for car repair. Another time it was to ask me to take care of Lisa during a trip she and Mark were taking. Always with that tone of someone doing an immense favor just by maintaining contact with me. "Mom, you've been strange lately," she said in one of those calls. "You seem more, I don't know, distant." It was true. I was emotionally distancing myself from them, not out of anger or bitterness, but for self-preservation. I was learning not to expect anything from them, not to be disappointed when their attitudes confirmed what I already knew, that I was just convenient, not loved. Christmas 2024 was approaching, and for the first time in decades, I thought about not preparing dinner. But then I changed my mind. It would be my last dinner, and I would make sure it was perfect. Not for them, but for me. To close a cycle, to say goodbye to this tradition that for years was my way of expressing a love that wasn't reciprocated. I spent a considerable amount on the dinner. Special turkey, imported ingredients, expensive wines. If it was going to be the last, it would be unforgettable. I spent 3 days cooking, seasoning each dish with the care of someone preparing a work of art. On Christmas Eve they arrived with the same rush as always. Lucy complaining about traffic, Mark with a sour face, Lisa glued to her phone, and it was there, standing in the kitchen doorway, listening to their cruel comments about my obsession with food, that everything became crystal clear to me. They didn't deserve my love. They didn't deserve my effort. They didn't deserve even one more second of my energy. During dinner, I observed each of them with painful clarity. Lucy, my daughter, whom I had raised to be strong and independent, had become a bitter and selfish woman. Mark, whom I had received as a son, was a small and petty man. And Lisa, my precious granddaughter, had grown up spoiled and arrogant, incapable of recognizing the value of anything that didn't revolve around her. When they left that night, once again taking the leftovers from my table, but no fond memories from my heart, I knew it was time to execute my plan. The next day, I called Dr. Martinez and confirmed all the changes to the will. The house and all my savings, a considerable amount accumulated over decades of hard work, would be donated to the Dawn Institute. For Lucy, I would leave only the letters I had written, letters where I explained my decision and my feelings. For Lisa, I would leave my recipe books, hoping that one day she would understand that food made with love has a different taste. For Mark, I would leave Anthony's watch, not out of affection, but because it was the only valuable thing I could give to someone who only valued material things. But the most important part of my plan was still to come. At the end of January, with all the paperwork resolved, I made a call that would change everything. "Lucy? It's me, your mother. I need to talk to you and Lisa. It's important." "Oh Mom, what drama is this now? Can't you talk over the phone?" "No, it needs to be in person, this afternoon at 3 o'clock, and call Mark too." There must have been something in my tone of voice, a firmness they weren't used to hearing, because for the first time in years they arrived on time. All three sat in the living room, with faces of curiosity mixed with impatience. I took a deep breath and began to speak, not from the kitchen, not serving coffee and cookies as I always did. Sitting in my armchair, facing them, with my back straight and my voice firm. "Do you know why I called you here today? Because it's time for you to know some truths. Truths I should have told long ago, but which out of love, or weakness, I kept to myself." Lucy rolled her eyes. "Mom, if this is about Christmas, we already apologized if we were rude." "It's not about Christmas," I interrupted. "It's about the last 20 years of my life. It's about how you turned me into a servant in my own house. It's about how you took my love and turned it into an obligation." The silence that settled in the room was dense. Mark stopped checking his phone. Lisa lifted her head, for the first time giving me her full attention. Lucy opened her mouth to speak, but I raised my hand. "Now you're going to listen to me. For 78 years, I lived for others, for my students, for you, Lucy, for you, Lisa and Mark. I cooked, cleaned, saved, sacrificed myself. I gave up my dreams, my desires, my own happiness, so you could have everything." "Mom, that's not true," Lucy tried to argue. "It is true, and the proof is in the way you treat me. When was the last time you asked how I really was? When was the last time you came here just for company, without wanting anything in return? When was the last time you showed gratitude for everything I did for you?" The words flowed like a torrent, years of hurt and disappointment finally finding a voice. "You see me as an emotional ATM. You show up when you need money, food, comfort for your frustrations, but when I need you, where are you?" "We have our own lives, Grandma," Lisa said, for the first time in the conversation seeming uncomfortable. "We work, study, and didn't I work? Didn't I deserve to have a life too?" My voice rose in tone, years of submission finally giving way to indignation. "You think I exist only to serve you? That my only function is to be here, in this house, waiting for you to appear to complain about my food and then leave?" Mark finally spoke. "Margaret, I think you're exaggerating. We like you, like," I gave a bitter laugh. "You like what I do for you. It's different, very different." I got up from the armchair and went to the sideboard, where the folder with documents was. "I called you here to communicate a decision I made after much thought, after much silent suffering." I opened the folder and took out a copy of the will. "This house, where you grew up, where I built an entire life, will no longer be yours when I die." The impact of the words was immediate. Lucy paled. Mark straightened in his chair. Lisa finally put down her phone. "Mom, what are you saying?" Lucy whispered. "I'm saying I'm tired. Tired of being disrespected, undervalued, treated like a burden. I'm saying I discovered where my love and care are truly appreciated." I took the photos of the Dawn Institute I had brought. These people here went through the same things I did. They were abandoned by their own children, despised by those they loved most. And you know what I discovered with them? That family isn't blood. Family is who stands by your side in difficult times, who values your presence, who returns your love with love. I showed them the photos, images of me smiling beside other elderly people, participating in activities, being useful and valued. "Do you see this woman here? This is me, happy, fulfilled, loved, something I haven't been for years inside this house." "Grandma, you can't do this to us," Lisa said, and for the first time I heard a note of desperation in her voice. This house is our inheritance. Inheritance is earned with love, with respect, with gratitude, I replied firmly. You never showed any of that to me. Why should I leave my goods to those who treat me badly? Lucy began to cry, but they were tears of panic, not repentance. Mom, please, let's talk. If we did something wrong, my voice came out louder than I intended. You did everything wrong. You took a woman who gave her life for others and turned her into a despised servant. I sat down again, regaining my composure. But you know what I discovered, Lucy? I discovered I don't need your approval to be happy. I don't need to humiliate myself preparing dinners for those who only know how to complain. I don't need to live begging for love from my own descendants anymore. The silence that followed was different. It was the silence of those who were finally understanding the gravity of the situation. What do you want from us? Mark asked, always pragmatic. I don't want anything from you, I replied with a calm that surprised me. I don't expect anything anymore. You lost the right to disappoint me. I got up and walked to the window, looking at the backyard where so many memories had been built. I'm going to live the rest of my life for me. I'm going to travel with the money I saved. I'm going to visit places I always dreamed of seeing. I'm going to spend my time with people who value me, who are happy with my presence. When I turned to them again, I saw 3 shocked faces, as if they were seeing a stranger in place of the submissive woman they knew. And maybe that was exactly what was happening. The Margaret who bowed, who swallowed insults, who was content with crumbs of affection, had died. In her place was a woman who had finally discovered her own worth. You can still change this, I said, but without hope in my voice. Not the will, that's already decided. But you can try to build a real relationship with me in the years I have left. A relationship based on mutual respect, not convenience. Lucy got up, her eyes red. Mom, I didn't know you felt this way. Of course you knew, I replied softly. You all knew. You simply chose to ignore it, because it was more comfortable to have a mother and grandmother who didn't complain, who was always available, who demanded nothing in return. But we love you, Lisa said, and for the first time in years, I heard something like sincerity in her voice. Maybe you do, I admitted. But love without respect is just disguised selfishness. It's wanting someone there to meet your needs, not to be happy. Mark finally spoke, and his voice was different, less arrogant. Margaret, if we made an effort to be better, would you reconsider? I looked at him with a mixture of sadness and compassion. Mark, I'm 78 years old. How many years do you think I have left? 5? 10? And you want me to spend those precious years waiting for you to become the people you always should have been? The question hung in the air, heavy as lead. They had no answer, because there was no answer. Lost time doesn't come back. Accumulated hurts don't disappear with an apology. I don't forgive you, I continued, and the words came out with a firmness that strengthened me. Not because I'm resentful, but because forgiveness without real change is just a way to allow abuse to continue. You'll have to learn to live with the consequences of your choices, just as I learned to live with mine. In the months that followed that meeting, there were pathetic attempts at reconciliation. Lucy began calling more frequently, asking about my health, my plans. Lisa appeared a few times with flowers and chocolates, trying to rekindle our old closeness. Mark offered to make repairs to the house, fix the kitchen faucet that had been dripping for months. But I was no longer the same person. I received their advances with politeness, but without hope. It was too late to build something genuine. They were being kind out of fear of losing the inheritance, not out of true love. And that made each gesture even more offensive. In March, I took my first trip. I went to the Northeast, to see the beaches I had always seen on postcards. I spent 2 weeks in Porto de Galinhas, walking on the sand, talking to other tourists, feeling free for the first time in decades. I took hundreds of photos, not to show anyone, but to keep in memory the moments when I was just Margaret, not someone's mother or someone's grandmother. When I returned, I found my house exactly as I had left it. No one had stopped by to check if everything was okay. No one had missed me. This confirmed that I had made the right decision. Lisa, you weren't a child. At 18, you already knew perfectly well how your words and attitudes hurt me. You simply didn't care. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Is there no way back, Grandma? No chance for us to reconcile? I looked around the hall, where dozens of elderly people smiled and laughed, helping each other, creating an atmosphere of true family. Lisa, I found my place in the world. A place where I'm respected, valued, loved for who I am, not for what I can offer. Why would I leave people who are good for me to go back to living with those who are bad for me? Because we're family. No, I said with a firmness that surprised me. You were my family. Now my family are the people who chose to love me, not those who were obligated by blood and failed miserably at the test. I hung up the phone and continued decorating the hall. Albert approached and put his hand on my shoulder. Everything okay, Margaret? Everything perfect, I replied.
And for the first time in many years, it was true. The Institute's party was magical. 100 people whom society had discarded came together to celebrate, not just Christmas, but the discovery that there was still hope, still love, still reason to keep going. I was at the center of it all, not as an invisible servant, but as an important person, loved, respected. While we cut the turkey we had prepared together, Rose pulled me by the arm. "Margaret, you saved my life. You showed me I still have value." "You saved mine," I replied, hugging her. "You all gave me back my dignity." That night, I returned home with a full heart and a clear conscience. I had made the most difficult decision of my life, but also the most liberating. I had chosen to love myself instead of sacrificing myself. I had chosen dignity instead of submission. I sat in the kitchen, the same place where I had so often cried from loneliness and despair, and wrote one last letter, not to Lucy, Lisa, or Mark, but to myself.